Today's daf we're going to be learning in Nedarim daf Mem Daled. Today's daf is sponsored by Lisa Hartstein in loving memory of her mom, Betty Mintz, Zichronah Livracha, Bat Sheva Ruth Bat Shalom V'Fegi on her third yurtzeit. Okay, we're going to get started now with the bottom of yesterday's daf. I will warn you, today's daf is quite complicated. I'm going to try to simplify it, but I want you to know, I always like to just put this out there. There's many different explanations of many aspects of today's daf among the commentaries. So there's a lot of things that are up for debate where there's multiple commentaries, which just means that it's kind of complicated. And therefore, as usual, nobody has all the answers and no commentary is perfect. So if you walk out struggling with some issues that you feel like didn't all fit in together, it's because according to each commentary, not all the pieces fit together perfectly. Right? I always like to say this, and I repeat it over and over, which is if there was one good answer, then we wouldn't have multiple, right? If there was one easy way to understand it, we would not have a multitude of opinions. And any time where there's a multitude of opinions, it's because there's always a weakness in every commentary and nothing fits perfectly. So with that, go in knowing that you might walk out thinking not everything fit together perfectly. That's okay. We're going to start with the braita at the bottom of Mem Gimel Amud Bet. We started it yesterday. We didn't really get into it because we're really in the middle of a braita. So we'll start there again, and then we'll move into our daf. Tanya, 3 lines from the bottom. Hamafkir et sadehu. Okay, I make my field hefker. Kol shloshah yamin yachol lachzor bo. Within the first 3 days, I could change my mind. Mikam ve'elach ein yachol lachzor bo. Okay, after that, I can't change my mind anymore. And if you look even just in Rashi right now, Rashi says, right, it's not really Rashi, the Mefarish, but where it says Rashi, at that point, it becomes exempt from tithes, because one of the laws of hefker is, since it's ownerless, you don't actually have to take truma maschot, which would mean that if I took it back for myself, I also would be exempt from truma maschot. Okay, so this is maybe going to explain further down the road why we have to wait for 3 days. We'll get back to that. Amal, but now we have the second part of the braita, which immediately the Gemara is going to say, this seems to contradict, and this seems to be that there's 2 different approaches in this braita, and that's weird because normally if that would be the case, it would have said, so-and-so says this, and so-and-so says that. Maybe even before we go into the second part of the braita, I'll remind you where we were in the Gemara and why we got into this. So we had in our Mishna a case where we were walking on path, you and I were on a trip, and you had no food, and you weren't allowed to benefit from me, and I wanted to give you my food. So what did I do? I said, this is ownerless, and then you were able to pick up the food. But Rabbi Yosi said that doesn't work. So the rabbi said, no problem, you can make it hefker. And the rabbi said, it doesn't work. Why? And then we had 2 explanations. The Gemara now is going to go back to the first explanation, even though the first explanation was rejected, which is already weakness number 1. As we already rejected his commentary, how is the Gemara going back? And in fact, there is a commentary who tries to explain the sugya totally differently and more according to the second explanation, but I'm not going in that direction. I'm going to explain it the simpler way, which is that the sugya is now going to go back to Rabbi Yosi, according to Rabbi Yohanan. So let me remind you, how did Rabbi Yohanan explain Rabbi Yosi? He said that hefker is like a gift. Until it leaves my domain, meaning until you pick it up, it's actually still mine. Even though I said it's ownerless, it's still mine until you've actually picked it up, which means that when you pick up my food, you're basically picking up something of mine. Because even though I said it was ownerless, it's not really ownerless until you pick it up, in which case you're benefiting from me. And that's why it doesn't work according to Rabbi Yosi, whereas the rabbis don't believe this. So according to, let's just even go where the Gemara is going to go so you see where we're going. If we just read the first part of the braita, who does that match? What does the braita say? Well, we don't yet know why 3 days. But the fact that after 3 days, I can't change my mind anymore seems an indicator that this is not Rabbi Yosi's opinion. Because what did Rabbi Yosi say? Something that's ownerless is only ownerless when you pick it up. Until then, I could change my mind as long as I want. So why the 3-day limitation? Now, obviously, according to the rabbis, we're going to have to say, why only after 3 days? It should be immediate. So it doesn't fit 100% according to either, but it does seem much more the rabbis, because according to Rabbi Yosi, you would theoretically have to wait. And you would not have to wait. It would still be mine until you pick it up, which means I can change my mind even past 3 days. I can change my mind a year later if nobody picked it up yet. But the second part of the braita we're going to see seems to be Rabbi Yosi exactly. Amal, if one said, now we're at the very top of our daf, Tehei sadeh zo mufkeret liyom echad, if I say my field will be hefker for only 1 day, or l'shabbat echad, or for 1 week, l'chodesh echad, for 1 month, l'shana echad, for 1 year, l'shavua echad, for 1 7-year cycle, ad shelo. Okay, so if I gave it a time limitation, okay, now normally you don't do that when you do hefker. When you do hefker, you say this is ownerless. But in this case, you did something a little strange. And you said, I'm making this ownerless for X period of time. Okay, this is like in Israel. I don't know if this happens in other places, but you can actually put out, you want to get rid of a table, you can put it on the street and likely someone will come and pick it up. Okay. Every once in a while you walk and you see furniture on the street, couches, you can also, the special sanitation will come and pick it up, but usually someone comes before that and picks it up and takes it. Okay. It's common. People come around on these trucks also collecting things. So you've basically made it ownerless. You put it outside your house. Anyone who wants to come take your furniture can come take it. But in this case, you put it on the street and you said, put a sign on it, come take my furniture, but I need you to return it to me after a year or something like that. So now, I'm glad to see it happens in other neighborhoods as well. Apparently in California, people do this. Okay. So now it says, Ad shelo zachaba. Now, at what point is this no longer yours? It's no longer yours until somebody takes it, right? If somebody didn't take it yet, bein hu bein acher, whether it was you who decided, you know what, I changed my mind, right? Imagine you put your couch on the street and then you, for whatever reason, decide to change your mind. I can think of lots of reasons you might, I don't know, your kid just rented an apartment, you didn't realize, and then you needed a couch. So, okay. But if I change my mind, I could bring it back into the house, okay? In other words, until someone picks it, right? If someone picked it up and then I decide I want the couch for my son, I can't get it back from them. But right, Misha Zachaba, once someone took it, whether it was you or whether it was anybody else, then you can't change your mind. Now it's a little bit weird. If I took it, I can't change my mind. What does that mean? I basically changed my mind. Some commentaries don't have those words. Again, I don't want to get too caught up on the different girsas and all the different ways of reading these sugya. Okay, but the basic concept here, and that's what's important to understand, is I have rights to it until someone takes it. So that means that's Rabbi Yosi, exactly, right? The rabbis say you don't have rights to it. You made it ownerless, right? It's ownerless. It's not yours anymore. So you can't really change your mind. Okay, now, again, it's a little bit tricky because once something's ownerless, I could decide I'm acquiring it. So to a certain extent, but it's not considered mine anymore, okay? Where that fits with Rabbi Yosi, but that doesn't fit at all with what we said in the beginning of the braita. The braita started off with, after 3 days, I can't change my mind anymore. It doesn't matter whether someone picked it up or someone didn't pick it up. I'm not allowed to change my mind. So, which the Gemara questions right away, Reish Rabbanan Sefer Rabbi Yosi. This braita doesn't really make much sense. It seems to be saying the first part seems to go with the rabbis, that it's not dependent on whether someone picked it up or not. You made it ownerless, it's ownerless. Again, the 3 days we have to resolve, but ownerless, it's ownerless. According to the second part, it's only ownerless, it only leaves your domain once somebody picks it up and takes it. So we're going to have 2 approaches. One is Ulla, who's going to explain the whole thing according to the rabbis, and one is Reish Lakish, who's going to explain the whole thing according to Rabbi Yosi. Okay. Amar Ulla. Seifanami Rabbanani. So again, the ratio was obvious. It was the rabbis because it wasn't dependent on it being acquired by anybody. And now Ulla's going to explain the Seifa like the rabbis also. Now, he doesn't really explain himself, to which the Gemara asks, but I don't understand. Ihaki, and it's what was the tricky line that made no sense? The line about until someone acquires it, right? So ihaki, amai ad shelo zachaba ben hu ben acher yachol lachzor bo. Why? In the case where you limited it in time, why is it limited to only once someone, right? It's ad shelo zachaba, you can change your mind anytime. Why can you change your mind anytime? According to the rabbis, as soon as you render it ownerless, it's no longer yours. You can't change your mind about it. To which the Gemara answers, Shane shana v'shavua de lo shliche. This is a unique case. Why is it a unique case? As I said before, normally you put out your table, your couch, whatever it is on the street. You don't plan to take it back. You don't limit it and say, if you want to take this, take it, but return it in a year, right? That's odd. I mean, there are some times where people do that, right? You might say, I don't need this table for the next year. If somebody wants it, they need it for this year, take it, keep my table and bring it back to me. So it's possible. But most people, when you say something's ownerless, you're saying, I don't want to have anything to do with this anymore. I'm done with it. So now that case, now here's the tricky part, which doesn't fit so well. It's not a common case. So what if it's not a common case? What does that have to do with anything? Why should then it be dependent on whether someone acquires it or not? Well, you'd have to explain it like this. It's not so much the wording lo shliche, it's uncommon, but it's more that what? Already I was limiting the ownerlessness of it. I was already saying, I'm limiting it to a year, I'm limiting it to a month, I'm limiting it, whatever I'm limiting it to, which means that if I'm limiting it that way, then maybe I'm not really giving up my full ownership of it, which means that just like I'm limiting it in time, again, this isn't 100% correlation, but one could claim, and this is what the answer would be, again, this is a good case where the question's better than the answer, but it is a possible answer. Once I'm limiting the hefkerut of it, the ownerlessness of it in time, I'm also limiting it in when it's going to click in. Only once someone actually picks it up is it going to be ownerless entirely. Until then, it's still going to be in my domain because it's the same idea. I'm keeping part of it in my domain, right? I'm saying, well, in a year, I want it back. And I'm also saying, well, it's also not going to leave my domain until someone actually takes it. Okay? So that's how we can explain the rabbis, according to Ulla. We can explain the braita is the rabbi's opinion, and that's an exception to the rule. Normally, it's hefker right away. In that unique case, we're going to assume you were limiting it in time. You're also kind of limiting it in when it's going to leave your ownership. Now we're going to have to explain Reish Lakish, who's going to read the whole thing like Rabbi Yosi. Reish Lakish amal, mi de seifa, Rabbi Yosi, leishanami, Rabbi Yosi. He says, no, the seifa is obviously Rabbi Yosi. Why is it obviously Rabbi Yosi? Because the language is so clearly Rabbi Yosi language. Now, it's not Rabbi Yosi language, it's Rabbi Yohanan's explanation of Rabbi Yosi's language, right? It was Rabbi Yohanan who said, why did Rabbi Yosi say, I can't just make my food hefker and you can take it? Because it's like a gift and it doesn't leave my domain until someone actually picks it up. So, according to Rabbi Yohanan's reading of Rabbi Yosi, that's exactly fits the braita. It's all about once someone picks it up, that's when it's really not mine anymore. Well, what's about the Reisha then? Why the first case does it say in it? Now, again, we're going to go back to this shliche and lo shliche. And here the shliche is going to make a lot more sense. There's two cases. One is a common case. I put something on the street. The second is a less common case where I limit how much it's going to be hefker, for how long it's going to be hefker for. So he says, the reason in the Reisha, hainu tama, de lo lishtakach torat hefker. Now, again, here there's many different definitions. I'm going to go with the simplest one. So it's the way, if you have the Koran in the English, it explains it very simply in this way. We're worried that you'll think that you can always change your mind about hefker. In other words, if we allow me to change my mind and say, oh, you know what? I changed my mind about it. Okay, now, what does Rabbi Yosi say? I could put it on the street and I could change my mind until what point? Until someone picks it up, right? And takes it. But if we allow me to change my mind before someone picks it up, people might think that I could change my mind even after someone picks it up. People might think that ownerless doesn't really mean ownerless. The fact that I gave it away doesn't mean I gave it away for good. And I can always just take it back. If that's not true, because I don't have rights to it once I made it ownerless. Because of that, Rabbi Yosi said, now here comes the shachiach and not shachiach. The rabbi said, okay, and this is rabbinic then only, it's a rabbinic law. By Torah law, it's not hefker according to Rabbi Yosi. It's only hefker once someone else, right? It's only not mine once someone else picks it up. Until that point, I can change my mind. But came the rabbis and said, once 3 days pass, it's no longer yours. You can't change your mind anymore. Why? So that we don't come to think that I could change my mind even once you took the table. And I decide, you know what, I want my table back. I can go demand it back from you and people will think that's okay. So we don't want people to think that's okay. So therefore we limit it and say, you have 3 days to change your mind. After 3 days, you can't anymore. Now, why 3 days? We don't know yet, okay? But theoretically, it should be immediately. And that's what the Gemara is going to ask in a second. Okay, so let's just make sure we get that. Okay, again, there's different explanations to what forgetting hefker is, okay? But we're going with Koran, the explanation they gave there, which is basically going to say, just so that you don't think that making something ownerless isn't really ownerless and you still can retain rights to it, even when someone picks it up, we're not going to even allow you to change your mind before someone picked it up, even though by Torah law, Rabbi Yosi thinks you can. Again, this is all Rabbi Yosi. By Torah law, Rabbi Yosi thinks you can. Rabbinic law came in and said you can't anymore. Now, what about the case where we do say it all depends on when someone picks it up? If you say it's limited to a year, to a month, to whatever it is, then we do say that you could change your mind as long as no one's picked it up. That's a rare case. Now we go back to the shachiach, lo shachiach. The rabbis only make takanot, ordinances, rules in regular cases. Because this is a unique case that doesn't usually happen, therefore there was no need to start saying, oh, if we let you do that, people will think. No, people don't come to the incorrect conclusions when it's such a rare case. It doesn't lead to lots of miscommunication, or the rabbis just don't think that there's a reason to make an ordinance in a case that's so rare. So that actually makes the rare make a lot more sense. Okay, so we've now explained, again, either you can explain the whole thing according to the rabbis, and how do we explain that unique case? Why is it up to when you pick it up? Because you're already limiting it, therefore you're limiting it this way as well. Reish Lakish says the whole thing's Rabbi Yosi. What about the first thing? That's a rabbinic ordinance that tells you specifically so that we don't forget about what this concept of hefker is, and you don't think that you can always change your mind, we're basically going to give you 3 days. To which the Gemara says, Ihachi, and here's a big debate also. I'm just going to kind of lay out where there's a lot of problems here. Who is this a question on? Is this a question only on Reish Lakish, what we just explained? Theoretically, it's also a question on Ulla as well, because we haven't explained the 3-day thing. Gemara is going to say, according to either which way you look at it, on the first day it should be hefker. Either according to Rabbi Yosi, according to Reish Lakish, because the rabbis made an ordinance that so that we don't forget hefker, we're going to say you can't change your mind about hefker. So why on day number 3? Why not on day number 1? And according to the rabbis, if you say that's a unique case, but otherwise hefker kicks in right away. We didn't say with the food case, you have to leave the food for 3 days, right? The rabbi said it's immediately not in your domain. So why do you have the first 3 days to change your mind? To which the Gemara answers, I'm a Raba. Raba answers, Mipnei haramaim timafkirin v'hadrin bahom. Now we get back to the master issue. The rabbis didn't want to let you do hefker right away and change your mind about it right away because they didn't want to say this is ownerless right away. They pushed off the ownerless status for 3 days. Okay, what they're basically reading this is saying, it means you could change your mind. What does that mean if you could change your mind for the first 3 days? It means this doesn't have the status of hefker. Why not? Because if we gave it immediate status of hefker, what would people do? People would wake up in the morning, declare their field ownerless, announce it, okay, wait 10 minutes, and then say, oh, I'm changing my mind, or I'm taking it all back. Now, if I take it all back, if once it's ownerless, I could say something's ownerless and then I can take it back for myself, right? Because it's owned by nobody. It's not owned by me. It's not owned by you. It's not owned by anyone. Theoretically, just like you could pick it up off the street, I could pick it up off the street also. Now, if I declared something ownerless and the ownerless status kicked in right away, again, according to Rabbi Yosi, it doesn't kick in right away. It only kicks in once you take it. Right? But the rabbi said it does click in right away so that we don't forget this concept of hefker. But we're not going to let it click in right away. We're going to wait 3 days. Okay? So this rabbinic ordinance is only going to start after 3 days. If you go with the rabbis, then you say, really, it's not yours right away, and really it's hefker. But we're going to push off that hefker status for 3 days. Why? Because there's cheaters. There's cheaters who basically want to get out of giving the tithes because it's a headache, right? You're going to forget the headache, right? It's a headache. It's a huge financial loss. You have to take a large amount of your produce. If there's a loophole, right? Everybody always looks for halachic loopholes. Declare your field ownerless. Take it back after 10 minutes or an hour. Okay, maybe give it an hour, right? How many people you think are going to take your stuff in an hour? Maybe you lose a little bit, but you won't lose as much as all the tithes you have to give. And voila, I'm now exempt from Trumot HaMaschot. So came the rabbis and they said, Because of Rama'im, cheaters, who are mafkirim, they turn their field into hefker, v'hadlim bahon, and then they go back and they basically take it back to themselves. Because of that, we're not going to allow the status of hefker to click in until 3 days. So that means if I declare my field ownerless, for the first 3 days, that produce is not exempt from Trumot HaMasrot, okay? It doesn't click in until day number 3. Now, why does that help me? Well, if I declare my field ownerless to get out of taking tithes, and I want to just save myself this money, financial loss and hassle, what will happen? If I make it ownerless for 3 days, there's a likelihood that by the end of 3 days, I won't have anything left. So I'm not going to do that if I know that this heter of exempting me from the Trumot HaMasrot only clicks in after 3 days. That won't help me very much because I won't have any field left. I won't have any produce left. Everyone will come and take it. So that prevents all the cheaters. That's what the 3 days are for. But now, according to Raba, this is what you call a gezerah de Rabbanan, right? The rabbis came in and said, okay, so now, again, this question sort of depends on who you're going, why, Rabbi Yosi or the rabbis. Let me just summarize, okay, so that it's clear. According to Rabbi Yosi, it's not hefker by Torah law at all. And it's not hefker by rabbinic law until day 3. Day 3, rabbinic law kicks in. It's hefker. Okay, so now let's go with Rabbi Yosi. On a Torah level, you're actually not exempt from tithing at all. On a rabbinic level, after day 3, you're exempt from tithing, but you still have a Torah prohibition, okay? According to the rabbis, immediately you're exempt from Trumot HaMasrot, right? You don't have to tithe anymore on a Torah level. Came the rabbis and they said, not until day 3. Your exemption doesn't kick in until day 3. So according to the rabbis, and this next section is a little easier to explain according to the rabbis, so maybe we'll go with that right now to keep things simple. According to the rabbis, you're exempt by Torah law from Trumot HaMasrot for the first 3 days, but you're actually obligated by rabbinic law. So now the Gemara says, Aval b'doraita lo have hefker. Now you can read this in 2 ways. Either on a Torah level, it's not hefker at all. That's Rabbi Yosi. Or b'doraita lo have hefker, but isn't it hefker on a Torah level, even though it's not on a rabbinic level? In other words, either which way you look at it, there's going to be this disparity. There's going to be Torah law, there's going to be rabbinic law, and you're either going to be obligated in one and not obligated in the other, and you're creating this complicated situation. And what's the real complication? If you have this produce that has questionable status, okay, let's take the rabbis because it's easier. By Torah law, you're exempt from tithing, right, within these first 3 days. By rabbinic law, you're obligated in tithing. So now you have to take it by rabbinic law, the tithes, okay? Now, what's going to happen if it's obligated in rabbinic law? But you might, now who's going to remember, right? If you learned this sugya and you learned it today, maybe by tomorrow, who's going to remember this, right? And if you never learned this sugya, you certainly won't know the difference. You just know that the law is you have to take tithes, okay? But within the first 3 days, you don't know whether it's rabbinic Torah law. Well, then you're going to come to major problems because we've learned this a number of times, but I'll remind you of this halacha. You can't take Trumot HaMasrot if you have produce that's only obligated by rabbinic law and you have produce that's obligated to tithes by Torah law, right? There's all different things that could have status of rabbinic or Torah law. This one's a good example. You can't take from one on the other. So if I have lemons that are obligated by Torah law and I have lemons that are obligated only by rabbinic law, I can't take one lemon from there and to tithe that, or one lemon from there and tithe the other. So according to this, you're going to end up with something with this in-between status. It's yes, this one, no, that one, and it's going to create confusion and people aren't going to know which one it is. They're going to end up thinking, maybe it's obligated by rabbinic law and it's only Torah law, or Torah law, rabbinic law, or it's not actually obligated at all and they'll think it is. And either which way, you could come to mistaken conclusions. And then you might end up using this for, right, doing some combination of this with other produce, and that will create a problem. So that's not such a problem, the Gemara says, because you just tell everybody that when you have this kind of produce that you made hefker, again, it could be, I'm not getting into all the possibilities. It could be within the first 3 days, according to the rabbis, that's where you're going to have a lot of conclusions, problems. According to Rabbi Yosi, it's after the first 3 days where you're going to be, by Torah law, it's actually not hefker and you're obligated in maaser. By rabbinic law, it is hefker and you're exempt from maaser. And that will, you're really obligated by Torah law, but you might think you're exempt because it's rabbinic, right? So it's going to create all this confusion. And therefore, what do we tell everyone? In order to avoid the confusion, take the tithes, okay, whether it's rabbinic or Torah law, it doesn't matter. Take tithes from that produce on that produce and don't combine it with anything else. You might have other lemons from some other tree. Just don't combine them when you do your truma namasot, and then you don't have an issue. Whatever it is, you'll take the tithes from that on that, and it'll be fine. The whole problem is combining it with other produce that you have that might have a different status, and you think it's the same status, but it's not. So to avoid that, we have a very easy solution. Okay. They don't really relate to the fact, what if you don't know that it's complicated? And then you're going to end up with the problem, right? If you didn't realize, because that's part of the issue, that it's unclear. And then you might think, but anyway, if you just say anything that you make ownerless, that you're going to take maaser because maybe it's not fully ownerless, so do it by itself. Okay, so again, let's just review because it's a bit of a complicated daf, but with a very easy structure. We started with the braita. We said the braita the first part seems to contradict the second part. One seems like Rabbanan, one seems like Rabbi Yosi. To which the Gemara explained, either like Ulla, it's all Rabbanan, and then we had to resolve the part that sounded like Rabbi Yosi, or we said like Reish Lakish, it's all Rabbi Yosi, and then we had to resolve the part that sounded like it was Rabbanan, and then we asked this question that we still hadn't resolved, which is why the 3 days, and we said that's because of the people who might trick people, and then we end up with different levels, Torah level, rabbinic level, and that creates a whole problem with the Truma Masrot. Okay, keep it within itself, and that will resolve the problem. Now, one more question. Meitive. Now we're going to bring a question from a braita. We're going to say that this really doesn't present a question to Ulla's commentary, but it does present a question to Reish Lakish's commentary. We're going to give one answer to Reish Lakish today, and we'll see another answer in tomorrow's daf. The sheet today the study guide covers both pages because I wanted to have it all charted out well. So we'll use the same sheet tomorrow, the study guide. Meitive. So now we bring another braita that seems to contradict. And this is going to go against basically what Raba said. Hamafkir et karmo. Ulla shachar hamadu b'tzaro. Is exactly the case I told you before. I decide my whole vineyard is hefker. And then early in the morning, right after, let's say I set it at 5 in the morning or something, and then at 6 in the morning, I go and I start harvesting it and taking it for myself. So chayav beperet u'ba'olelot u'b'shicha u'b'peah. All the rules about the things that you're supposed to leave in the field for the poor people, that's an obligation on whoever harvests. It's not an obligation on whoever, if it's my field, if it's ownerless, ownerlessness doesn't get you out of those obligations. That's an obligation for anyone who's picking from any field. You have to do that. But patur min ha'maaser, but I'm exempt from the tithes. Now, didn't we just say that I'm not exempt? Because the first 3 days, we have this rabbinic thing, because of these people who cheat and do exactly this, that it's not hefker and it's not exempt from maaser. So that goes against what we said across the board. But the Gemara thinks that it actually makes sense with Ulla, even though I'm going to raise a problem with this, but Bishlam ala Ulla. To the Gemara, it seems obvious that Ulla has a very easy explanation. There's the rabbinic and there's the Torah law. And our braita, which said 3 days, was the rabbinic law. Because remember, according to Ulla, he explained our braita according to the rabbis. According to the rabbis, it's hefker right away. You're exempt from maaser. But what? There's cheaters. Because of the cheaters, the rabbis changed the rules, and the rabbis said wait till day 3. So the braita that we saw earlier was the rabbinic law. The braita that we saw now is the Torah law. Even though we don't practice it, that's the basic Torah law. So theoretically, by Torah law, it's exempt from maaser. The obvious problem with this, I don't even need to say it, is it's quite confusing that the braita doesn't usually give you a Torah law without saying this is Torah law and the rabbis changed it. Because the Mishna usually tells you what you're supposed to do. I mean, again, it's not exactly a book of laws, but it is more a guide of what the rabbis said and not necessarily what it said exclusively in the Torah. And it's a little bit confusing to say this, that it was talking only on a Torah level, but sometimes the Gemara gives that as a response, and one could say that. So again, according to the rabbis, it makes perfect sense on it again. And therefore, according to Ulla, who explained our braita like the rabbis say hefker kicks in right away. Again, don't confuse the rabbis and the rabbis, okay? There's the rabbis, which is the rabbinic, the Chachamim's opinion here. Then there's a rabbinic ordinance that, according to everybody, was instituted by rabbis. Okay, there's the opinion. When I say the rabbis, first I mean against Rabbi Yosi, the general opinion that hefker kicks in right away. That is Torah law. Then there came this rabbinic ordinance that we're going to push it off for 3 days so that people don't cheat. So that's how we explain the two braita. One is by Torah law and one is by rabbinic law. Ella Reish Lakish, amai patur min ha'ma'aseh. But according to Reish Lakish, who explains it like Rabbi Yosi, how do we explain Rabbi Yosi? We said Rabbi Yosi holds, really, it's not hefker, meaning it wouldn't be exempt from tithes until someone picks it up. So if I take it back, it's never really exempt from tithes. But what? In order to maintain that people don't get confused and forget this whole laws of hefker, we're going to say after 3 days, it's already hefker. Not 1 day, because we don't want cheaters, but yes, 3 days. Okay. So the 3 days, yes, it'll become hefker, but not immediately. So this braita totally doesn't fit with Rabbi Yosi, because there's nowhere where Rabbi Yosi thinks that there's hefker right away. He thinks from day 0 to 3, there's no hefker, not by Torah law, not by rabbinic law. So how are you going to explain this braita that seems to say hefker kicks in right away and it's exempt from the tithes? So first answer for today, and then we'll end. Amar lecha, he would say to us, what? Ki amre ana le Rabbi Yosi ha Rabbanani. I was talking about Rabbi Yosi. I explained the braita according to Rabbi Yosi. But this braita is the rabbi's opinion. That's a very easy solution. This is actually a much easier solution than Ulla's solution. That's why I thought it was a little strange that the Gemara said Ulla is so obvious. I think this is so obvious. This is an obvious answer. It's very simple. Don't bring a braita to question me from the way I explained Rabbi Yosi. I explained that braita, the first one, the one we started with today, is all Rabbi Yosi. This braita that says the hefker kicks in right away, that's the rabbis. It doesn't bother me. This is the rabbi's opinion. There's Rabbi Yosi's opinion. They disagree. Okay, no problem. That's a very easy resolution. For whatever reason, the Gemara is going to explain another resolution, and we'll get into that tomorrow. So hold off till tomorrow. Remember all these things till then. And I hope this was clear enough. Again, if I also, part of the reason I like to say is I'm going by certain commentaries is if you have a Gemara with commentary and you read it and you say, this doesn't match what I said, it's because not all the opinions match my reading. Okay, I'm going with certain commentaries and kind of a mix of the ones that to me were able to be explained the clearest way without getting too complicated and trying to add too many details that aren't really in the text and, get a little bit off into other things. I tried to explain it as simply as I could, but there are many different interpretations in the sugya, as I mentioned, and parts that are a little more complicated to understand, but hopefully that was clear, and we will continue pick up from here tomorrow. Very short daf tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone.